Welcome to tonight's webinar on community and conservation, the power of collective action in Cheshire. My name is Becky Williams and I'm a Wilder Lives Officer at Cheshire Wildlife Trust. So we've got an amazing panel this evening who I'm very excited to introduce. So to kick things off, we've got our very own Wilder Communities Officer, Andy Stubbs, who will be talking about some incredible community groups in Cheshire, and he'll be delving into the potential for nature recovery when we combine our efforts and work together. So then following that, we'll hear from a fantastic example with Paul Kemsley from Goostrees Community Group, who will share some first-hand experiences of how their local efforts are making a real difference. And finally, we're really happy to welcome Iona from Record, which for those of you who don't know, Record is Cheshire's local wildlife record centre, and she's going to delve into the importance of wildlife data and show you how to get involved in citizen science to support actual conservation research, because there are many ways to get involved, not just practical action, as I'm sure we'll see this evening. So plenty to look forward to. And most importantly, for those of you who stick with us until the end, you'll have the chance to ask your questions directly to our fantastic panel. So with that being said, if you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to write them in the Q&A feature, and later on I'll read them to the panel. Alternatively, you're welcome to ask your questions yourself if you prefer. And if you're on your phone, sometimes the Q&A function doesn't work, so feel free to pop them in the chat and Rachel will transfer them over so we don't miss any. And then lastly, I'll be sending out a resource pack in the next few days, which will include lots of inspiring community stories and some of the resources mentioned tonight, as well as the recording of the session in case you wanted to rewatch any of it or send it to someone that you think might find it interesting. So very quickly, why are we doing this webinar? So at Cheshire Wildlife Trust, we know how important both individual and community action is for nature's recovery. And with wildlife in decline, we really need everyone to play a part in that in any way they're able to. So my hope is that by the end of today, you'll leave feeling very inspired and brimming with ideas about how you can make a difference, whether it's at home, on your street, in your community, or even your workplace. Small actions can add up to make a big difference. So yeah, if you're here simply to just listen to some uplifting success stories, I really hope you'll take pride in knowing that groups of people across Cheshire are driving real change to help wildlife at a time when it needs us the most. So I will stop babbling on and I'll hand over to Andy, our Wilder Communities Officer, to tell you much more.
Hello, so I'm Andy. I'm a Wilder Communities Officer for Cheshire Wildlife Trust, and I'm terrible with technology. So today in meetings, it's been turning me pink all day, and I don't know why. So if I turn pink, someone let me know, so it doesn't feel like you're being presented to by Mr. Blobby. So yeah, why are we here? So I started my career in conservation working on country parks and nature reserves, quite practical, and struggled with like the people movement side, struggled delivering to people because I wasn't very confident and was terrified of people. And then I decided to get a job working with people at Cheshire Wildlife Trust. They tantalised me with the opportunity to work in crew, so I couldn't say no. And I've never looked back. It's the most rewarding job in the world, in my opinion. And yeah, just in this presentation, I'm going to go into a bit more detail on why we do it and hopefully some inspiring stories from across Cheshire. So why do we do it? We can't do it on our own. We can't recover wildlife on our own. So there's a really good graph here that explains it in more detail. So at the moment on this graph, the trajectory we were going is the grey. So we're kind of slow in nature's decline, but we're not stopping it. It's still going down to a place where it won't be recoverable. With increased conservation efforts through conservation charities doing more, we can improve it. But we really need a green revolution. We need everyone on board. And this is coming from someone who used to be terrified of working with people, to get that nature's recovery back in the green, back into recovery, into a place where it's not just improving, but it's better than it was when we started. We as a wildlife trust have been around for about 60 years. I think the whole wildlife trust started in 1912, and we're still kind of going down this great trajectory. So we need something different to be able to start nature's recovery. And yeah, I think we have the answer in people. So a bit of a last boring bit about why we kind of do it. So this is kind of the strategy behind what we do. Essentially, we are helping people help us achieve a green revolution because we can't do it on our own. So rather than just plugging away, we're supporting people to put stone to build a cathedral, which is the people movement. So that involves everybody, no matter what their background is, age, identity, culture. Everybody has a part to play. We listen. So rather than going in and telling people what to do, we listen to what they want to do and support them in their commitment to change. And this in turn leads to nature being higher on people's agendas at a local, regional, and national level. It's getting voted for in Parliament. And yeah, got a couple more examples of that coming up. So what is a community? Question I get asked all the time. This is a definition from the World Health Organization, but very keen for it to be nowhere near as complicated as that. A community is just a group of people, a bunch of people that are concerned about a similar interest. So it could be a fully constituted friends of group that contact us because they want to create a hectare of wildflower meadow in the park to increase biodiversity. But it could just be a group of dog walkers who are sick of getting blamed for dog poo being everywhere, so they want to put a bin in to improve their green space. So yeah, just run through a few examples of groups I've worked with that make up different types of community. So starting with a business. So this is Cowell, who are train engineers. They work through the night to repair our train tracks. We don't even know they exist. And come to get on the train at 7 a.m. in the morning. Everything's running smoothly. They told me that they've never had a day off in the year, and this is in December. They decide to come out and plant trees on their Christmas do. But you can see the community there of people. They came out. You can see the Peak District in the background. So it was a agroforestry scheme. Can you see my mouse moving? I'll stop doing that. Ralph on the left designed this really forward-thinking agroforestry scheme, and it gave an opportunity for these nighttime train engineers to get involved, and they actually planted 1,100 trees in one day and got it done so quickly we had to find other tasks for them. So it could be a council. So Sharrington Congressi Parish Council came to us through an event we were holding in Queen's Park, a family-friendly event. Wanted to transform a roadside verge. I don't know if anyone in here in the room has tried to do anything on a roadside verge before, but it's not easy, and fair play to them. They managed to plant two wildlife-friendly beds and a wildflower meadow in the middle. The only involvement I had was sending an email with some sort of species and guidance. And just to mention from that, this sort of felt emblem in the bottom right is what we call a ripple effect. So one action having a spread out effect of loads of different things happening. So from that, they asked us if we would be interested in supporting them to work on a 7-acre Great Crested Newt mitigation site. Well, absolutely we would. Then through their contacts, so there's Kelpbrae and Hickories, which is just the pub inside from the roadside verge. And we've got contact for a school, which are now helping plant an orchard to provide food for a local food bank. And then a pond, a wildflower meadow, and a rooftop garden from there. So you can see how one thing kind of creates a ripple effect from that.
Just really quickly, sorry, I think someone might have their microphone on. Would you mind just turning it off just because we're getting a bit of an echo? That would be wonderful, just while the panel is speaking. Thank you. Sorry, carry on, Andy.
Thank you. And then a community cause, so a campaign. So this was around the River Weaver and Nantwich. So It started as a Facebook group and gained momentum, all about cleaning up the river and tackling water pollution. They got up to 1,100 members in the group now. This sort of social pressure got them a meeting with their local MP, and it's a cause that's now been fought in Parliament. Residents Association. So I didn't know I had that many slides. That's the Residents Association. So that's kind of the end point, but it started off with that listening. So this was the listening exercise they ran to get feedback from residents if they'd be up for transforming a 150-metre long bed at the back of their houses. All these kind of suggestions fed into a draft plan, which went through 5 stages of consultation. A lot of work went into it, but there was absolutely no public backlash because they listened to what the community wanted at the start rather than going in with an idea and consulting on it and half the people not liking it. That kind of successful process led to a meeting with a corporate who didn't bat an eyelid. I think we cost it over £10,000 worth of materials, and the corporate didn't bat an eyelid, said yes, not only to funding it, but also to providing the power to redevelop the area, clear it, rotivate it. They got the YMCA involved and Cruise Shedders, so loads of different organisations come together. And then a Friends of group. So this is Haslington Conservation Group. So they came up, Connie, who is just here, came up with the idea for an orchard and a wildflower meadow. So from that idea, they formed a constituted group, got funding, local people sponsored trees, came out to plant them. That Friends of group's developed to the point now where they've had ecologists on site there talking about replanting an area of W6, older nettle woodland. So like really technical from just an idea at the start. Then I don't know if anyone noticed, but all those examples came from Crewe and the surrounding areas. So this is kind of my saying at the moment: if Crewe can do it, you can do it. So it's now, for over the past few years, developed around 35 projects, from targeted species recovery to cautiously digging ponds and cemeteries. Yeah, so you can see how that's kind of developing. So there's things that people can get involved in all the town. Across Cheshire, I just got a few. Oh, that's the next slide. Yeah. So people quite often get surprised that Crewe gets sort of media attention. So you've got like the Daily Express, magazines, and ITV Granada reports. And it's simply because it's where the people are. And that's what matters to the people watching at home. They don't want to hear about a special species of sphagnum moss up in the rural countryside. They want stories about people like them. And that's how we get, again, nature further up the agenda. So yeah, a few examples from across Cheshire. So this is Crosstown Community Orchard in Knutsford. So I was there a week last Saturday for their wassail because they built from an initial idea of an orchard and try a community of people around it. They received about £12,000 in funding, even hired us in to do the planting day. They do planted wildflowers under the trees, delivered training courses for the public, guided walks. And what's quite special about Knutsford at the minute is they've got 6 community groups doing very similar things there. And they've created their own network in Knutsford that are working together to fight different causes, working together to fight, apply for funding bids together with all that kind of basis. And the town council have worked on a green spaces consultation. So they've got that whole evidence base behind everything they do. Hamilton, so amazing group that are planting a tree for every resident in the town, going from strength to strength. You'd think, well, never plant 30,000 trees in Congleton, but they've nearly done it. Definitely worth checking out their page for more information. And if you're from Congleton, get involved in that. Map Wild Network. So they started in 2021 with the idea to build a green wild belt around Macclesfield. I think they've done about 12 projects to this point, from wildflower meadows that you can see in the top right, collecting green hay from the meadows to create more meadows around the town. Really cool stuff. And their core members are also members of Save Danes Moss, which is one of the best community-led campaigns against development you're likely to see. So just to say as well, it's not all practical. You don't have to be able to dig in a tree to be able to get involved in these groups. There's different ways you can get involved, like I said, with campaigning, also supporting groups with digital things, recording, like Iona is going to talk about later on. There's loads of different ways you can involve people and take people along with you. And then one of the first questions I got asked given a talk when I took on the communities role was, what about rural communities? Historically, at Cheshire Wildlife Trust, we've mainly worked with cities simply because it's where the people are. Tends to be where the funding gets allocated because it's where the people are. But a lot of exciting work, both in our trust and elsewhere, is getting targeted towards more rural work. So a really good example of this is the Derwent Valley project over in Derbyshire. So that's linking Cannock Chase up with the Northern Forest project, a massive living landscape area that's doing loads to involve the communities up and down it. And then the best example I've seen of community work up and down the UK is called the Langholm Initiative. And they've created the Terrace Valley Nature Reserve, which is a community-led project. They've raised over £6 million and now have an area of about 43 square kilometres that they manage to protect for the community and nature. To put that into perspective, over the entire history of all the conservation work in Cheshire, it's about half of that in one project. Obviously, Scotland has very different scales with land and different ways of working with land, but I think that's a really good example that communities can do it. These are just a few examples of things people have said to me and kind of facts you experience when you're reading about research and about what you're going to be doing and stuff. So people have pointed in my face at a gig in Nantwich saying, "You're not going to plant any more trees, are you? The basil's already lost," things like that. I think it's quite easy to get bogged down. So I just wanted to finish on a slide of hope. So we do have the answers. We have all the space we need. Over 80% of our population live in urban areas, and just 6% of our island is built upon. Doing something is better than nothing, and inspiring someone else to do something is even better than that. That quote is from a book called Rebirding. So if you have read Wilding by Isabella Tree, the next book I'd recommend is Rebirding by Benedict MacDonald. It's really inspiring, and it's not all about birds, I promise. And just to say, if you want a story that's inspiring, join Cheshire's Wild Network. It's just a click on Facebook. You can unlike it if you don't like it. I know, Becky, you're going to sell this better later on, but yeah, as a member of a community group, I definitely recommend it. So back to Becky.
Thank you so much, Andy. That was brilliant. Yeah, it's so inspiring to see just how many community groups there are, and there's so much going on in Cheshire that maybe people weren't aware of. And I love nothing more than when I hear about a community group who see a problem and they think, I'm going to be the solution. I'm not going to wait for the council to get involved. I'm just going to do it myself. And it's brilliant. And there's so many examples there that you've shown that just show that community action can and does work. So thank you so much, Andy. That was so great to hear. And speaking of wonderful community groups, that was an easy segue. So our next speaker, sorry, is Paul Kemsley from Goostrees Community Group, who will hopefully tell you a bit about their community group, what they've been up to, and maybe some advice for anyone thinking to do something similar in their neck of the woods. So over to you, Paul.
Hi, thanks very much, Becky, and thanks, Andy, for that. You've stolen a great deal of my thunder. I've got to be said, because I agree with absolutely everything that you've said so far. And I'm sure you've learned all that on courses and doing different things. Whereas for me, unfortunately, it's all come from getting it wrong over a large number of years and gradually trying to work my way through things. So just the background to what we do is, first of all, we are one of those rural areas. So I'm from Goostrees, which many of you probably know already is near Holmes Chapel, but we fall through the gaps for an awful lot of things. So we're not particularly well, you know, if you ever apply for lottery money or you ever do this or you ever do that, we're not an area that would naturally attract that. So about 10 years ago, I thought, well, we're not really doing anything here in terms of nature. So I did, in fact, get on with the council and ask them, you know, if I could, you know, plan anything out, maybe plant some trees on some of the wasteland and whatnot. Now, I just want to check there's no one here from Goostrees Parish Council, is there? No, good. Okay, because I didn't really get a lot of, you know, I didn't get any pushback, but I didn't get any support either. It was very much, we haven't got any lands, we can't do that, it's health and safety, da, 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 da. So Andy, and what he says is absolutely right. Maybe I shouldn't have procrastinated for 2 years, but at the end of that 2 years, I thought, right, that's it, stuff it. I'm just going to do it myself anyway. And fortunately, quite a few things fell together. So the first thing is, I'm also the Cub Scout leader locally. So I already had a lot of young people interest, or even if they're not interested, if they come on a Thursday night to Cubs, then they're doing obviously the things that we're doing. So so I had that audience there, and I think that very much helped in as much as, well, then appreciating we don't have any land at all. So I was very much having to approach landowners. And again, you know, you can have that nervousness about approaching them because some of them can be pretty gruff, to be fair, and you know, anti-incomers, as I would be known as in Goostrees. So, but the young people aspect of it really did grab them more than the actual wildlife aspect of it. So it was very much, oh, we really liked the young people to be involved in the countryside. They don't really understand the countryside. It would be great if they could come over and, you know, learn a bit about it and get involved. So it was with the young people that our first couple of projects were done. Even with doing those, I would say most of the landowners are rather take it or leave it. They weren't bothered either way with the work that we did. So they came, some of them made us a cup of tea, but they wouldn't necessarily be involved in any of the organising and arranging and, you know, getting the kit on site and whatnot. But we then, we ran the first 2 events very successfully. And that was just for like Cubs, Scouts, Guides, Brownies and that kind of thing, but with all of their parents involved as well. I did that for a couple of years, only doing small projects, but you know, very gradually they build up. Now I've got some photos here. So here's on the left-hand side there. This is actually one that we've done just recently. So you can see there's a hedge planting here, and it's all young folk. This was actually done with the school locally. So again, I happen to know the school teacher who's keen on the environment. So she basically said, "Are you doing anything?" Yes, we are. So we got them out. I also got you can see on the right here, all this fencing and these tree guards and everything were all done by Duke of Edinburgh's award, who obviously were in my scouts and are now a bit older and want to do those kind of projects. There's quite a few photos. I tried to find ones without me in it, and I think I've been successful, but there's another photo of us planting some trees on a farm. So the actual map shows around the area of Goostree of all the different bits that we've done. In fact, we've done some more bits, though wouldn't quite fit on the map. So you can see that each of the tiny little projects are tiny little projects, arguably, you know, 20, 30 meters of hedgerow here, 40 meters there, a little woodland, maybe a little orchard. But when you add it all together, and now we are nearly 10 years in, it is starting to join together. You do find that you know, you start to make a real difference. So some of the ones that are getting older now, a couple of things are happening with those. One, obviously all the wildlife's moved in. There's far more, well, we've seen hedgehogs, we've seen hares, we've seen yellow hammers, which I hadn't seen for many years. In this particular hedge here, we've seen those kind of things, but also the young folk who are not so young anymore coming up to us and saying, well, you know, I planted that tree all that time ago, and it's really good to see that it's still growing. You can see here a few of the people in action. So with the young folk, I've got them all to decorate these tree guards, and we put those all out on a little hedgerow that we planted, again, just on a corner of a footpath that was just wasteland, that I just said to the landowner, do you mind? And he was very much, no, I don't. And I never saw him again, but he let us do that, and they're still there today. Then you can see the Duke of Edinburgh's Award lads. that was the one photo I managed to get them actually doing anything rather than just planning it, which is their favourite occupation, working out how to do it rather than actually doing it. So they're putting up some tree guards there to stop the cattle. And that's another one of our projects there. You can see all the young folk getting involved, planting up a little woodland that we have permission to do just off a footpath. So we always try and make sure that all of our arrangements are done next to the footpaths, where people can go and see them afterwards, and don't have to, like, obviously go ask for farmers' permission. So just to round up, I don't want to obviously carry on forever, but I think the first thing, my learnings are these. Well, the first one is, if you've got a plan or you've got a thought at the back of your head, is my suggestion is go and do it. I think Andy referenced the fact that there's probably no one else that's going to do it. Don't wait for the parish council. Don't wait for someone else, because there isn't really anyone else that does it other than the people who think of it. So get in there and do it. The second thing is, rate your success on based on what you wanted to achieve. So sometimes we run events, especially when it hammers it down with rain, very few people come, or there's very little interest. And when that happens, just you think, well, there was 2 or 3 people there, they all got something out of it. We planted some trees, they obviously grow and flourish. So it was still a success, even though we didn't get the 100 of people that sometimes groups do get. It's very variable, and it's, generally speaking, nothing to do with what you do. It's generally just the weather, or any number of factors, the football's on or whatever. There's all sorts of different things. The same thing goes with landowners. Don't be put off by those. Obviously, as I say, some of them can be pretty gruff. I actually know and are friends with quite a few, which has been very useful, but you've got to listen to what their agenda is, and sometimes it can be very different to what yours is. Don't obviously start mentioning lots of things about rewilding immediately to farmers. They tend not to be up for that. But anything to do with their animals, or the animal welfare, and all these aspects of it are always very well received, I've found. And also, obviously, the involvement of young people, again, also very well received. You still do find some that are just unworkable, but you know what we do? We just ask them, if you find a brick wall being built, I'll just move on to the next person. There's lots of people out there. You don't have to be dealing with people who aren't keen. If they come back to you at a later date, like one person said no, 3 or 4 years later, they're saying, oh, having to bump into them. Are you still doing that? Yes. And we're back in. So just, stay positive by dealing with other positive people has always been the key. Celebrate the successes, say you don't need to plant 100 meters, 200 meters, just 10 or 30 meters. But when you do it for 10 years and you do it 3 or 4 times a year, that's really, really good. So, it was interesting to be asked to come on here as a success story, really, because we always feel that we could do it a great deal more. We're not incorporated in any way. So we're just an unincorporated association. There's me and another lady that's joined. Actually, she came up with the name Goostrees, so don't blame me. I won't come up with a cheesy name like that. That was actually something that came along later. But as I say, we're not anything special. We're not incorporated. We're not, trying to change. Well, we are trying to change the world, but we're not, we're not all of that. We're not that great big nature reserve that you saw on the picture before. We're nothing like that. But what we are doing is filling in a gap. And we talk to people locally as well, like that Trees for Congleton that are next door. And it's really great to feel that we could join up with them, and do projects with them. So yeah, that's really us in a nutshell. I mean, obviously, if you've got any questions about what we do, I'm more than welcome to answer them. Someone's put Goostrees, a great name. Honestly, if you live in Goostree, everything's goose this, goose that, goose the other. It's Goose Fest, goose this. It's just not my idea. But anyway, thanks so much. All right, so I'll hand back control.
Thank you so much, Paul. Goostrees is a great name. I'm obsessed with it. Although someone recently was like, that thought, knowing me, that it was a spelling mistake, and they said, "Do you mean goose tree?" And I said, "No, I mean Goostrees." It's fantastic. But yeah,
starting to get T-shirts, so I opted out of that group some time before then.
it's memorable. You've got to give it to them. But yeah, thank you so much, Paul. That was amazing. There's so much good advice there that I'm sure a lot of the community groups on this call will be finding a lot of what you're saying relatable, and finding a lot of it sort of like, I've never really thought of it like that. And it's I completely get with what you're saying about it's easy to get bogged down when landowners aren't interested or people don't come when it rains. But you, like you say, you just got to persevere, and you will find your people. So yeah, wonderful. And I'll definitely be stealing your idea of decorating tree guards. I think I might nab that. A wonderful idea. And just really quickly as well, I think if we'll do questions at the end, if that's all right. So if anyone's got any questions for Paul or Andy, put them in the Q&A and I'll read them later on. So yeah, thank you very much, Paul. So next up, we have Iona from Record, which is fantastic because she can explain a bit more about what Record is, and show you some different ways to get involved in wildlife conservation. There you go.
Great, thanks, Becky. So yeah, I'm really pleased to be here to talk to you all this evening. I know some names already from people who have been in the chat, but hopefully a few people that might not have heard of Record before. So I'll just be giving a little bit of an overview about what we do and about wildlife recording in general. And hopefully you'll all sort of see that it's something that hopefully you can get involved in and take that away and do that with your communities as well. So Record is the local environmental record centre for Cheshire, Houghton, Warrington, and we've also got a massive name, so you can see why we generally just shorten it to Record. So we're part of a network of local environmental record centres. So I know at the beginning some people were saying maybe off from other wildlife trusts or maybe other areas outside of Cheshire. So just to say, although I'm going to talk about wildlife recording in the Cheshire area because that is what my organisation does, you will have your own local record centre in your area, so I'd encourage you to try and find out about who they are. They'll be doing very similar things to us as well. So a local record centre is we're generally a not-for-profit organisation who collate and manage information on the environment for a defined geographical area. So again, very kind of long and complicated term for what we do really, but basically put in simple terms, we're collecting information on nature across our area and we're trying to make that useful for conservation, and a lot of the information, or pretty much all of the information that we collect really, does come from people like yourselves, so groups and individuals doing it generally in a voluntary capacity, sometimes as part of their jobs but normally not, getting out into nature and documenting what you find. And for us, that documentation that we sort of manage, that covers, like I said, the whole of Cheshire, Houghton, Warrington and Wirral, which is what that map on the right is just showing you. The star's just where we're based in Chester, but we do cover quite a massive area, which is why we always like to try and reach out to lots of different groups, kind of like I'm doing now, to try and get lots of people involved because we can't be everywhere. We're quite a small organisation ourselves. So I said we collect pieces of wildlife information from people like yourselves, the general public. That's normally just coming in the form of, we call them biological records, but it is wildlife sightings. So you may be thinking, oh, you know, I've never done any wildlife recording, I could never do that sort of thing, I wouldn't be able to show my group how to do that, I'm not an expert enough to do that. However, most of you are probably halfway there already, because generally people like yourselves probably like looking out of your windows, seeing what garden birds you've got. Have you got robins visiting? Have you got blackbirds visiting? Maybe at the sites that some of you might manage, you've probably got quite a good idea of what wildlife you've got there. Have you got peacock butterflies? Have you got comma butterflies? Have you got nice lovely cinnabar caterpillars? Have you got, can't think of any other animals now, but any sort of animal or plant counts as a wildlife observation. So you're probably already doing the looking out for stuff. You just might not quite be doing the documenting part of it yet. However, it's not hard to do at all. So yeah, obviously I'm going to be encouraging you to do that. So yeah, like I said, you're interested in any wildlife sightings and also evidence of wildlife as well. So even if you have just got molehills, that sounds really boring, but that's also something you can record because it tells us that the moles are there. You might even have a fox that leaves a poo on your lawn every day. Yeah, not the most glamorous kind of wildlife record, but that definitely counts and that can be recorded as well. So why might you want to record wildlife? Well, one reason is because it's fun, hopefully, for most of you getting out in nature and looking at what's there. It can also help the wildlife itself as well. So looking at things from sort of maybe a local perspective, collecting information on your local wildlife and sharing it with the appropriate people, which for us, as I'm going to tell you later, is us at the local records centre. It can help to inform decisions on local development. So it's quite a nice way that people like yourselves can, or one way I should say, that you can feed into those decisions really. So if you are sending your wildlife sightings to your local environmental records centre, that data is available to ecologists working on local development. So it's how we kind of keep going as a charity, is we charge ecologists to provide reports on data that people have sent in to us. So someone might be maybe going to build some houses nearby to where you live or where you work or where you've got your group, and they'll come to the ecologist working on that housing development will come to the local record centre. So for the area I just mentioned, that's us. They'll ask us to do a data search and we're able to look through all of those wildlife observations going back many years, and tell them what's been recorded. That can affect their decisions. So it can affect maybe any mitigation work that might be needed to try and protect the wildlife. It can affect what gets built, how it gets built, when it gets built. I should say it's kind of part of a bigger process. Often they'll do their own surveys as well, but the local record centre data search is kind of a way of them seeing that wider picture, and also of, like I said, people like yourselves being able to feed into that as well. So going about that quite a lot, but it is one of the most important uses from my perspective of the data. But there are other good reasons as well. So it allows us to look at increases and decreases and to look back on what's happened in the past as well. So generally, if I ask like a room full of people, or if I were to ask 60 people on this call whether you thought there was more wildlife or less wildlife around than say 20 years ago, generally, if you were to think about that, what most people normally say is that there is less wildlife around. Very unfortunately, as we all know, our wildlife is in trouble, just to depend on the species, but a lot of it is in trouble. However, even though that's kind of a well-known phenomenon and widely reported phenomenon, we wouldn't know that unless people had been recording it. So unless people had been doing, 20 years ago, unless people had been out looking and documenting what they were seeing, then we wouldn't know that a lot of stuff has decreased. So that's why you need to do it. If you imagine in 20 years' time, someone's going to be looking back on what we're recording now, and if it's all just sort of in our heads, then that doesn't help them too much. So we need to make sure it's kind of shared and documented properly, for them to be able to see what's changed. So even things we think of now as being like super common, so like a good example would be the house sparrow. They're often thought of as quite a common bird, but they have declined a lot in recent years, and who knows what's going to happen in a few years' time. They could be doing even worse. So that's why it's important to record even the common stuff. Everything makes a difference. It's not just like golden eagles or like that sort of thing. It's even the stuff that you see every day that is important to document as well. It can also help to protect areas important for wildlife. So data that we get feeds into things like the local wildlife site system, if anyone's familiar with that. So they're sort of like areas that are sort of protected for wildlife under sort of various different systems across the country. Actually, it can feed into things like, so we're doing a project at the moment to do with ancient woodlands across Cheshire, so looking at which areas constitute ancient woodland habitats and which don't. If they do become, if an area is an ancient woodland, that's a sort of really protected habitat, so it's important for that sort of thing as well. And well, not finally, there's one more thing before I do the final one. So it can also help to monitor the effect of conservation work too. So by feeding your data into places like your local record centre, that's available to people such as the Wildlife Trust is a good example for tonight, but other people who are doing conservation work on their wildlife reserves or on their land can access it as well and can potentially see what things were like before, so they know if what they're doing is making a difference or not. In terms of community groups as well, if you guys, as many of you are, if you are out making sort of changes for wildlife in your local area, if you're planting trees, wildflowers, anything like that, keeping an eye on what wildlife you've got and seeing how things changes is generally quite a useful thing to do, so you can see if you've made a difference and made things better, which I'm sure you will be doing, but it's good to have that kind of record of things, and yeah, to see maybe where to direct your future work as well, to see which areas you want to kind of try and help, whether that's certain species or certain parts of your site or that sort of thing. So that's kind of like why you might want to record your wildlife. This is how to do it. So there's quite a variety of options out there, and to be honest, it can be a bit overwhelming sometimes. So people have quite often heard of things like the Big Garden Bird Watch, which is actually pretty relevant because that's like this weekend. So yeah, that one's coming up. That's a nationwide project that the RSPB run. You might have done the Big Butterfly Count. There's so many like citizen science projects out there to do, and there's lots of apps as well nowadays. So many of you will probably have some sort of wildlife identification app on your phone. There's loads and loads of different ones. So I'm just going to mention some of the options and why I think these are good options, but there's others out there as well. So if you aren't into apps, which not everyone is, you can still use pen and paper. So it still counts just to go out there, write a list of what you see. You want to be documenting what species you've seen, where it is, and when it is the main things to make up your sort of wildlife observation. You can send that in to us at the local record centre, or you can take a photo on your phone of your list and send that in, is what people often do now. You can also email us your data as well. So some of you may like spreadsheets, maybe not many of you, but some of you may be into that sort of thing. Maybe you'd like to keep a list on a spreadsheet and email that over to us. That is excellent. You could send us an email with, I've seen this here, maybe a photo sometimes is useful as well. So plenty of ways to get in touch. We've got our own volunteer team that enter that sort of data into our database. So that's definitely an option if you don't want to be sort of doing that yourself. I should say about emailing photos in as well. So another thing that kind of puts people off in terms of wildlife recording sometimes is the obvious thing of not knowing what something is. So generally, if you do want to record it, ideally you want to find out what it is. However, if you don't know, there's lots of ways that you can do that without being an expert. So we definitely welcome people sending us photos. There's hundreds of relevant Facebook groups online as well. So you've got the Wild Network one, which is probably relevant to a lot of people in here, but some other kind of more specific examples. There's a Cheshire Moths group, there's a National Bee, Wasp and Ant group, there's all sorts. Just have a quick look, and generally you'll have someone answer you very, very quickly with what you've got, or sometimes if they can't identify it from a photo, they'll offer you some tips for taking a different kind of photo next time. So definitely get involved in that sort of thing. There's obviously various books, and clearly there's the internet that you can use for identifying stuff as well. So don't be put off, and yeah, if you don't know where to start at all, just get in touch with us. There's also apps as well. So you've got iRecord and iNaturalist, which I sort of think are the two sort of main two apps when it comes to wildlife recording versus just wildlife identification. So iRecord is more of a kind of UK one, and iNaturalist is more of a global one. They're quite similar, and they've got really similar names, so it's pretty confusing, to be honest. They're also nothing to do with like Apple either, even though it's like a small I, so it all gets very confusing. But the iRecord is probably slightly more complicated if you are just starting out, if you're a beginner. but it does allow you to record a little bit more detailed information about what you're seeing. iNaturalist is really good if you've never done any sort of wildlife recording before, because it's really sort of intuitive, easy to use. You basically get the app, go and take a photo of something, a plant, an insect, something like that. It's got AI on it, so it will help you identify it from the photo. It doesn't always get it right, but it obviously gives you, various suggestions. You can upload that to the app, to the database, and it's also like an online community, so you'll get people coming back and commenting on what you've recorded and saying, yes, I agree, it's that species, or no, I think it might be something different. So it's quite a good way of kind of learning as you go along as well. iRecord is sort of similar in that you can do that as well, but it's only the expert that can comment on what you found. So it's great in some ways because you know that whatever response you get is from an expert. However, there's a small number of experts, almost all of which do it as a volunteer in their spare time. So it can take much longer with iRecord, but those are sort of the main two kind of wildlife recording apps you can get on your phone. Our one we've got on our website is called Swift, so that's just the one in the bottom right. Swift is a little bit, it's better if you don't have a photo, if that makes sense. If it's something like a bird and you definitely know what it is, I would always go with something like Swift for that one, because if you're using iNaturalist and you haven't got a photo, the records basically get stuck on the app and we can't use them. Not that I can really go into loads of detail on that now because it's all very complicated, but yeah, so general rule, generally something like Swift is better if you haven't got a photo of it, and you definitely know what you found, and it takes a bit more getting used to use it, but it's not difficult, and we can provide a lot more support with that one as well, because obviously it's our own system. So yeah, if you get in touch if you're stuck, and we'll be able to help. And then finally, what does the data get used for? So I've touched on some of this already, but just as a bit more sort of inspiration for you to get out there and get sharing your data. We use it for our commercial inquiry service, I've called it there, but that's just what I was talking about earlier in terms of it feeding into the local planning system. We also share data with lots of other conservation organisations as well. So people like the Wildlife Trust, as I mentioned, Woodland Trust, Mersey Forest, to name a few that work locally, but lots of others as well. It goes onto the NBN Atlas, which if people haven't looked at the NBN Atlas before, it's worth a look. It's just a website, but it's a national sort of repository for wildlife observations. So if you want to see where a certain species has been recorded across the UK, you can get a map of that. It kind of gathers data from all sorts of different places, and the data also feeds into local things like the bee, wasp and bee, that's such a mouthful, the Bee, Wasp and Ants Atlas of Cheshire is one example. So that's kind of like mapping where those species are across Cheshire and how they're doing. Also things like the State of Nature report, which you may have heard of. I think the latest one was like last year, I think it was relatively recent anyway, but all of those kind of big reports that say our nature is in trouble, and sort of tell you like this many species have declined this much over this many years. All of those sort of statistics, generally they're from lots of different sources, but a lot of the sources are volunteer wildlife recorders. So it is people like yourself going out and recording stuff and sending in records. So a lot of those, yeah, like the State of Nature, there's a really lovely quote in it, which I haven't put on the slide, but it basically just sort of states that all the data that is really, really important for understanding our nature across the UK and locally does come from volunteers dedicating their time. So it's a really, really important thing to do, and hopefully sort of like a nice quick thing to do as well. Just document what you find while you're going along with other stuff maybe. Yeah, I think that's about all I've got to say. I shall pass back to Becky. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Iona. That was fantastic. I think it's so obvious from everything you're saying that you don't need to be an expert to be able to contribute to local conservation efforts and research, which is so great. It's not all practical. We all love taking photos, but it doesn't take that much more to actually upload it to an app, and something great can happen from it. So yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for going through all of that. And I think what struck me the most is that, yeah, if new developers are looking at a site, but you've got, let's say, some rare species being recorded there, that might either slow the process or halt the process completely. So, you know, citizens can make a difference, and it's a really exciting space. So thank you so much. So I just wanted to quickly mention, which has been mentioned a few times already, but I want to mention it again. As you've hopefully seen this evening, there's an inspiring movement of wildlife enthusiasts and community groups across Cheshire doing such amazing things for nature in their communities, their gardens, schools, workplaces, you name it. And at Cheshire Wildlife Trust, we call this community the Wild Network, which I'll quickly explain. So whether you're planting community orchards like some of the ones we've heard tonight, or maintaining wildflower meadows, the Wild Network are protecting wildlife in their local areas. So joining is completely free, and it's open to anyone who supports wildlife in their community, or maybe would like to but isn't sure where to start and needs some help. So if you sign up, you'll get our monthly newsletters, so you'll be on our mailing list, and you can stay up to date with everything. So these are packed full of information about our free training workshops and guided walks, as well as wildlife help guides, support, funding opportunities, positive news for nature, because I think we all need some positivity in the all doom and gloom with the nature sphere. So yeah, we would really like to run some more workshops and events that help you to upskill, to improve your wildlife knowledge and your confidence, because knowledge is power, and the more we know, the more we can do. So for example, and there's an example on the screen, but we run things like guided fungi walks, workshops on how to create a wildflower meadow, wildlife photography workshops. You know, there's a bit for everyone, and it's all completely free. So I would recommend joining, and I'll send the link in an email in the next couple of days. We're also on Facebook, which a few people mentioned, some lovely pictures of some community groups on here, like Sustainable Nantwich. So the group's slightly different in that it's more about celebrating people's efforts and connecting like-minded people together who can share ideas and resources and updates about what your group have been up to. And groups are also welcome to sort of promote their events on there. So if you're looking for more volunteers, maybe pop a post on there and see if you can get some more people going. Although like Paul was saying, if it rains, it's make or break anyway. So yeah, there might be a group on the other side of Cheshire that's got experience at planting and running an orchard, for example, that you could ask advice from. Who they're the people who will be able to give you the best advice of what that experience is like. And yeah, just at the end of the day, we're all working towards the same thing. You know, we want nature to recover in Cheshire. And we think it's about time we start working together to really amplify that movement. So thank you so much to everyone who submitted questions to the Q&A. I'm going to try and get through as many as possible. If you'd rather ask your question directly, you're welcome to raise your hand. And I'll just get the Q&A up. So let's have a look. There's a couple for Iona that I saw. So firstly, which is the most used platform by planners and developers? And I also saw another comment which said, what do you think of the Merlin app, which I assume is the Merlin ID app?
Good questions, yeah. So in terms of planners and developers getting their data, often a requirement of the planning process of, I don't know, it's not my area of expertise, as I'm sure we'll probably show now, but often a requirement of that is that they will come to their local record centre for a data search. So if we don't have the data, we won't be able to give that to them. And the quickest way to get the data to us is through Swift, which is our own data entry platform. Or if you don't want to put it in there, you can email it to us. If you are thinking particularly of an area where you know that there's maybe a problem, or maybe problem is the wrong word, but something upcoming, it's always worth just popping us an email just to give us sort of the heads up, because we can just make sure that we kind of fast track that data, as it were, just to make sure it's there hopefully in time. Sometimes we do find that people kind of come to us maybe like a little bit too late. So sometimes the ecologist has already had their data search, by which point we can't really do anything. We just give them what we have at that point in time. So it is, as well as being kind of reactive with it, I think it's also worth just sort of doing it as you go along, because that'll feed into the wider database, then it'll be there when it's needed. I wouldn't like to comment on what other platforms developers use, because they may look at others as well, but I think in terms of giving it the best chance of making sure it feeds in, I'd say, yeah, make sure your local record centre is getting the data, and that depends on who your record centre is. Yeah, we're all different, and also what you're using, so we don't get all the data from my naturalist, for example, due to licenses and things, which I probably can't cover all that now. However, I can provide more information at a later point.
Amazing. Thanks, Iona. What do you think of the Merlin app?
I really like the Merlin app. I use the Merlin app a lot. I don't think there's a way of linking the Merlin app to anywhere where you're sharing the data. So if you are using it, I'd say try and share that data with your local record centre. In another route. I don't think you can do it directly through the app, although I may be wrong. Things may have changed, but it's very good.
It's a great app. I'm a big fan of I often don't know what a bird it is, and I can just flick the app on and it tells me. So yeah, no, thank you very much. That's brilliant, Iona. We've got someone with their hand up. I think that's Jeff. If you want to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, two things really. Another great app is Flora Incognita for identifying plants, and that's a very good app. It's usually pretty accurate, and because it knows where you are, it doesn't come up with, like other countries', plants which you can't possibly have. It does actually identify plants which you would expect to see in your own country. Second question is really for on iRecord. When an area moves, like Trafford moved into Greater Manchester, or when Avon was created back a long time ago, do the records get transferred into a new system?
Is a very good question. So yeah, for us in Cheshire, we're in a sort of similar-ish situation in that we cover the local authority areas of Cheshire, West Cheshire, East, Houghton, Warrington and Wirral, which doesn't include Trafford. I don't know the history of that, but I'm assuming that's maybe moved out of Cheshire. And but a lot of wildlife recording is based on vice counties, so we also cover VC 58, which is not quite the same. It's a slightly different geographical boundary. It's hard to say definitely for everything, but generally we do share records with our neighbouring local record centres. So for Greater Manchester, we get data from them that people have sent them for us, that's ready for us, and vice versa. But it's not a very quick process. It'll generally be once a year at the most that would exchange it. So it's generally best if you want it to be quick, to make sure you know what area you're in and get it to the right one.
Brilliant, thanks, Iona. A question, I think probably for Andy, from Mandy, which is Andy from Mandy. Where is a reliable resource to get facts around health and safety rules and what can and cannot be done in public spaces? I see so much misinformation in local Facebook groups, but I'm not sure where to get the facts. Thank you. Do you want to have a go at that, Andy?
Yeah, I'd say contact the landowner. If it's in a public realm, it tends to be the council. So we were talking with Stockport Council a couple of weeks ago, and they have like a really good approach to working with community groups. So they actually upskill them, train them in tools and things like that. So you never know what's available till you speak to your council. They are not everyone's best friends at times, but a really good starting point for things. But yeah, if you need any help with risk assessments, get in the Wild Network and ask the question. I'm sure there's another group with a risk assessment that can help you. Brilliant.
Yeah, no, just to second that, yeah, when I send out a resource pack, I've definitely got some good online guides about how community groups can set up their own risk assessments and work around health and safety, and all the rest of it. So yeah, they'll actually be coming out in the next newsletter in February. So stay tuned for that, and I'll remember to include them because I think that's a really good question. Next, a question, and this could be for anyone, from Niall. We had a meeting with our MP last week, and she offered to ask questions in Parliament about biodiversity and the various demands on our limited land area. We already import half our food, and we need houses and energy. What do you think we should get to ask her? What is the big issues? Would anyone like to have a go at that? Don't all jump at once, that's fine.
Yeah, I'd say that's something that's important to your local constituency. Obviously, constituencies are a lot more local than the kind of issues facing Cheshire as a whole, but that's really how to get you. James might disagree with this, but how to get local politicians on board is issues that mean a lot to your local people. So, like using the Restore the Weaver as an example, I wouldn't expect them to raise an issue with losing 99% of wildflower meadows in Cheshire. It's an issue. There's loads of flooding in Nantwich and water quality and pollution into the river in Nantwich. So do something that you're really passionate about and that's important to you and that you're going to get local backing for.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Oh, someone's got their hand up. Nigel. In fact, let me just allow. There we go. If you want to unmute yourself, Nigel. Should be at the top of the screen. Oh, there we go.
Hi. Here I am. Sorry. I was just wondering, I live in Stockport and I live in a place called Merley's Field, and it's like it's been built on in the next year or two. And I was just wondering, have you heard about that? Because I've heard that the Cheshire Wildlife are doing the managing the land after that. I just wondered if you've heard of it. I was interested.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I'm not too sure about it. I don't know if Andy or Rachel has heard anything about that either. I know that there's a call for sites in Stockport at the minute so that they can figure out which ones, basically people can call for sites to be protected for nature or suggested for housing developments, but I'm not too sure on Cheshire Wildlife Trust role going forward.
Oh, okay.
We have worked with them in the past. I'm not sure where we're up to at the moment, but we can look into that for you and follow up in the email.
Yeah.
I guess I'll probably look for the email and then see what sites are around there, my area as well. We'll see which one's the best or nearest.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'll follow that up and find out for you. But yeah, it's a really good question. Fab. I think we probably have got time for one more question. So I'm just looking in the Q&A. So Amy from Alsager has asked Iona a question. Can we add data from the middle of last year to record? I did a session where we identified plants in a bug hunt, and I still have that data.
It cut out for a second there, but I think I've read the question anyway. So yes, you can add data going back as far as you want, really. You just put a date and when you saw it. So yeah, I said in the chat, we've been adding stuff recently. We've got like a museum data set, which is records from like 100 years ago and more. So it's all still valuable. So yeah, just put a date in it if you don't know exactly, like a vague date, like it was during this month or during this year or even.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Wonderful. Now, I think that's probably all we've got time for. I just wanted to really quickly finish on this quote because I love it so much that, yeah, individually we are a drop, but together we are an ocean. And I think it speaks a lot about what's come up tonight, you know, that collective action can make an even bigger difference. And if we can connect like-minded people who really care, we can create this sharing culture where we're sharing resources and tips and volunteers and our time. And yeah, I wanted to finish on that. So yeah, thank you. A huge thank you to our amazing panel for taking the time this evening to share their wisdom and their experiences. Hopefully that's given you a bit of a flavour of how communities in Cheshire can and are making a real difference in conservation, and you've learnt that there's more than one way to get involved. It's not all practical. Just really quickly as well, there are so many groups out there, and if you would like to know what groups are in your area, please drop me an email and I will happily send you some to look into. In the future, we're hoping to set up a communities map on the website so you can see everything going on around you. Someone mentioned earlier, like, is there an interactive map? We're working on it, I promise. So yeah, last one to say, please join the Wild Network. We've got loads of exciting things planned this year. It's all free. There's lots to get involved in, and keep an eye on your emails for the next day or two for a resource pack and a quick survey. And yeah, thank you so much for attending this webinar, and have a lovely rest of your evening.